Hi, I'm David. I head business development and developer relations at Kongregate. As a platform for free-to-play browser games and a mobile publisher of free-to-play games, Kongregate has a unique perspective and a lot of data on free-to-play retention, monetization, and how to optimize those in your games, as well as player satisfaction. We work with developers from all over the world, including a lot of developers from Asia. And in this talk, I'll share best practices, highlight some common mistakes that Asian developers make when bringing their games over to the Western market, and provide specific do's and don'ts with examples. So you'll get a better understanding of what the common mistakes to avoid and how to maximize the chances of succeeding in the Western market. So before we get started, a quick introduction about Kongregate. So what is Kongregate? Kongregate, first of all, is an open platform for browser-based games. Anything that runs within a browser we support. Flash, Unity, HTML5, Java, JavaScript, so forth. In fact, more than 96% of our users already have Unity installed, which is a huge percentage, because for most of the web, it's like 10 to 20% of people have Unity installed. We have over 21 monthly unique visitors who are predominantly core gamers. 85% of them are male, with an average age of 22. And they like MMOs, RPGs, collectible card games, trading card games, strategy, shooters, and so forth. With a platform-level currency called creds, short for credits, that's used for free-to-play games with in-app purchases and virtual goods. And we were acquired by GameStop almost 4 years ago. GameStop being the world's largest retailer of video games. And Kongregate is also a mobile publisher of free-to-play games for core gamers. Here are some of the games that we have published on iOS and Android. You may have played some of these games. They include Game of Thrones, Tyrant Unleashed, Sheep Happens, Lionheart, Run, and so forth. And last but not least, Tiny Dice Dungeon is actually from a local Singaporean developer called Spring-Loaded. They might be somewhere in the crowd or somewhere at this event. But this game we just published recently, and it was featured by Apple at launch, and it's currently in the Google Play homepage, so you can go check it out. It's a pretty fun game. On the browser side, we work with developers from all over the world of all shapes and sizes, from small independent developers to big multinational companies like the ones you see here. But in fact, most of the developers we work with are small independent developers. So before I get into the list of do's and don'ts, I wanted to do a quick summary of my Casual Connect Asia presentation from last year and provide some stats, as this talk is kind of a sequel to last year's talk. So here we have a graph showing the ARPU and RPPU for all the free-to-play games on Kongregate. The data is a little bit over a year old, but the same pattern holds true since this is from last year's presentation. Each bubble here represents a game. The size of the bubble represents the amount of revenue. The y-axis is average revenue per user. The x-axis is average revenue per paying user. You can see that there is a very big range here. ARPU can go from 0 all the way up to $8. In fact, the $8 game is now more like $10. And ARPPU can go from $0 all the way up to $350. And in fact, that game is now over $500. And there's a cluster of games in the bottom right that's mostly single-player games. The bubbles in green represent games by Western developers, while the bubbles in brown represent free-to-play games by Asian developers. And the ones in purple are what we call mixed developers, which is typically a Asian developer that's based in the West, or a Western developer that's based in Asia, kind of combining aspects of and design philosophies from both the East and the West. Here you can see that the bubbles in brown, representing games from Asian developers, tend to have higher average revenue per paying user, while the ones in green tend to be lower. And now we're looking at percentage of buyers. Games from Western developers do a better job of converting players to buyers. You can see all the green bubbles tend to be more on the right, while the brown ones tend to be on the left. And as for percent repeats. This is percentage of players who played the game at least 2 times. So measuring initial game retention. The green bubbles tend to be more on the right, and the brown ones tend to be more on the left. So Western developers do a better job of retaining players on early in the game. And the same holds true for long-term retention. This is percentage of players who play the game 50 times or more. Again, green bubbles on the right, so a higher percentage of players end up playing the game 50 times or more and being retained in the long run in games by Western developers. So to put into numbers, on the top we have a chart showing different purchasing behavior in Western multiplayer games based on how many times they play the game, going from 1 time, 2 to 10 times, all the way up to 500 times or more. You can see that for a player in a Western multiplayer game, they're spending on average about $167 if they've played the game 500 times or more. However, in an Asian multiplayer game, a player that's played the game 500 times or more, the ARPPU is $528. So they're spending a lot more. So in summary, Asian games have higher ARPPU, but tighter player funnels due to lower retention. Monetization really caters to big spenders, like you saw in the last charts. While in Western games, they have lower ARPPUs, but wider player funnels due to higher retention. Monetization focuses more on strong retention and converting more players at lower prices. Some common mistakes made by Asian developers when bringing their games to the West can account for these differences and lower retention and monetization. Or lower conversion rates, I should say. So what are some common pitfalls to avoid and best practices to adopt? So first of all, what works in Asia doesn't necessarily work in the West. First example is Puzzle & Dragons. Hugely popular and successful game in Japan. It's been #1 in top grossing charts for a really long time. However, in the US, you can see the App Annie data that while it's still good, it's still just in the top, usually 90 to 150 top grossing charts in the US. Sometimes it could be higher due to like an update event or sale, but usually around that range. And top grossing, 100, 150 it's still pretty great, but still not as good relative to this game's success in Japan. Another example, Empty Car Battle from Loco Joy. Huge success in China, but much less so in the US. If you look at the US App Annie data, it's much lower. So you can't expect the game to be successful in the West just because it was in Asia. Part of this can be due to the game's theme. Many successful games in Asia are based on Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Journey to the West. But Westerners are not very familiar with these classical Chinese novels and not familiar with these themes. So they're not very likely to want to play games with these themes compared to some medieval themed game. And they also have trouble remembering names of characters and locations if they are in Romanized Chinese. It may be harder to follow the game's story or even play the game if you can't remember the name of the character you're supposed to talk to complete a quest. Another example, Autumn Dynasty Warlords from a local Singaporean developer called Touch Dimensions. This is a great game. It's a RTS game set in ancient China. And as much as I like the game, as fun as the game is, the theme, I think, limited its success in Western markets because they only appeal to a very niche, small audience in the West. And you can see their App Annie data. Singapore is on the left and the US is on the right. Very big difference in the top grossing charts. So do consider how universal your theme is and how it appeals to Westerners when deciding which game or whether to bring your game to the West. So auto-pathing, auto-combat. These are very common mechanics found in Chinese MMOs. Autopathing is when you are presented with a quest and you just click on the quest link and the player automatically runs around and completes the quest without you having to control the character. Auto combat has the AI take over the battle and finishes the battle with no input whatsoever from the gamer. So the last 2 years we've seen a flood of games with autopathing and auto combat coming out of Asia, particularly China. These are very, very popular with Chinese gamers in MMOs because they see them as convenient features that speed up the game and reduces fatigue from grinding. However, in the West, gamers don't actually like these features and it's very unpopular. Western gamers like interactivity, control, and choice. They want to play a game, not watch a game play, not watch a game play itself. And they feel that all the auto-pathing, auto-combat games are essentially all the same because all you do is click on the quest links and watch the game play itself. Here are some comments that players have posted in games with auto-pathing and auto-combat. You can see that the reaction is very much, these games are all the same, they're no fun, they're not interactive. And the number in green next to the comment is how many people agreed with the comment and upvoted them. So you can see that a lot of people felt this way. If you have an auto-pathing, auto-combat game, but it has both manual and auto-combat options, do not set the default to auto-combat. Instead, show the player both options and give them the ability to set the default, or set the default to manual combat. Here's an example from a Chinese MMO called Tales of Solaris. In this game, they had both auto combat and manual combat. However, the developer automatically set the default mode to auto combat. So a lot of players didn't even know that there was a manual combat mode. But the game was actually a lot more interactive and a lot more fun and play like a Japanese RPG when you set it to manual combat. But players didn't know this. So we had them change the default mode to manual combat, and we saw player comments, player ratings, and initial retention improve as a result. Western developers and players have very different attitudes towards free-to-play and pay-to-win than their Asian counterparts. First of all, free-to-play games have become a very dominant business model worldwide. But in Asia, developers and players are more used to paying for power, in general. While some Western developers and players aren't as comfortable with this and don't like it. Some of them don't like games they feel are pay to win or giving an unfair advantage to spenders over smaller spenders or free players. So some games actually try to avoid appearing downright pay to win. We have there are some Western developers that want to make the game equal for all players regarding if they spend or not. Here's recent example of Wargaming announcing they're going to eliminate all pay-to-win aspects in World of Tanks. It'll be interesting to see how that works out for them if the increase in retention and player the way players perceive the game will make up for decreased monetization. Here we have a screenshot from Kabam's Dragons of Atlantis. It's a game that has a very large hard currency package. In fact, the one that's highlighted in red, it's a hard currency package that's worth $400. And there was a lot of player comments that they were shocked at how high the packages were. This player is complaining about who in their right mind is going to spend $400 in a free-to-play game, and more than 1,000 people upvoted this comment. So so what can you do here? Soften the perception of pay to win and avoid sticker shock. Don't scare away potential players or buyers with high prices. So one thing you can do is hide packages that are $100 or more until after the first purchase. So you thought $400 was bad. Here is a more extreme case. This is a Chinese CCG game with a VIP system. A VIP system is where you can earn VIP points by buying hard currency within the game, which is gold. With VIP points, you level up your VIP level and comes with increasing VIP rewards and bonuses. So at launch, the developer stated outright that you need to buy 200,000 gold in the game to unlock VIP 10, which is the highest level of VIP in the game. And then players quickly calculate that it would cost $4,000 to unlock VIP 10. And players took to the comment section to complain about this. Even those that liked the game were complaining. So here's our user comment. This user was saying, this game is fun, this game is awesome, I really like this game. But he was shocked that he had to spend $4,000 to get VIP 10. So he's saying, unless this system is fixed, good luck. So we worked with the developer to soften the messaging. They removed the text about having to buy or spend enough money to buy 200,000 gold to get VIP 10. And after they did that, there were very few or no complaints about this anymore in the game. So don't come across as a very greedy, money-grubbing developer. Be very careful about the placement and messaging of big-ticket items. So customer service expectations. You often hear the customer is always right, and this holds a lot more weight in Western markets than Asia. The customer culture is much more different there. Consumers feel much more entitled. They have higher expectations for customer service. And then they are empowered to do so. They can have the ability to get refunds, issue chargebacks, organize boycotts, and so forth. So you need a good community management team and customer service team in order to keep players satisfied and keep them in the game. For example, here is a forum post from a Chinese MMO that had a very big bug in the game. And it didn't go fixed for a really long time, and players got very angry. And several of them posted in the forums that they were going to boycott the game and go on strike, not buy any gold until this bug was fixed. And the developer saw daily revenues decrease as a result. But then once they fixed the bug, the players were satisfied, and then revenues went back up. But they did lose some players because of this. The more time you play a game, the more emotionally attached you become. And the more invested you're in a game emotionally, the more likely you're to invest in the game financially. But players are much less likely to invest financially in a game in which they feel like they can't trust the developer, especially if the developer is very inactive. They wonder, does the developer care? Will the game get updated? Will they fix the bugs, and so forth? So creating a positive community and showing good customer service can go a long way. Players are much more confident that their investment of time and money will not be wasted. So show players that you care about them, not just about making money. Be visible, be responsive, and be informative, especially about maintenance and changes, so giving them advance notice so they can prepare. So communicating during a crisis, things don't always go smoothly. Sometimes bad things happen. The game goes down because you have server issues, major bugs appear after an update, and players will be upset. I don't know if you can see this, but this is a very, very angry user who posted a lot of obscenities because a game went down after it had maintenance. Effective crisis management can help calm down the storm. Be transparent, honest, and open. Post in the game forum or communicate to players to apologize and assure them that you're working on it and that you're aware of the problem. don't be silent. Players could perceive this as you not caring about the game or not caring about them. This is one of the biggest mistakes I see a lot of Asian developers do. Due to time zone differences, language barrier, cultural barrier, they tend not to be very responsive and then only respond after they have fixed the issue. But this creates a perception problem with players because they don't think that you care. So you have to communicate with them and let them know that you are aware of the problem, are working on it. Provide updates regularly, even when you have nothing new to report. That's better than nothing. Just saying, oh, we're still working on it, get the game back as soon as possible, really sorry, please bear with us, goes a long way. If you're unsure about when an issue will be fixed, avoid giving specific timelines. Just saying, we're doing it as fast as we can. And don't forget to express regret and acknowledge players' frustration. This is another common mistake I see a lot of Asian developers make. Say something like, oh, we know this really sucks because it's in the middle of a guild war or clan war, so you're losing a lot of valuable time and money or a boost you just bought. So we're really sorry, we're trying to fix this as fast as we can. Use customer service as a chance to surprise and delight. Handle things quickly, be generous with compensation. Don't be stingy because poor compensation can actually make things worse. Don't do something unless you're willing to do it for everyone, because players will talk about amongst themselves and know what they each got for compensation. And again, don't forget to express regret. An apology goes a long way. Canned messages or short messages can come across as cold and corporate. Just saying, oh, it was fixed, you can play now, shows no regret or sympathy about the situation. Here's an example of a poor compensation package that made players just even more angry because it was worth very little for the game being down a long time. And now some miscellaneous best practices. Timing is everything. Here is a user comment saying, oh, what is the server time? We need a server time so we know when events take place so we don't miss things. So specify specific time zones or set a server time and have it be visible within the game so there's no confusion as to when something takes place. Here's an example from a Chinese MMO called Wartune. They do a very good job with the top bar of the loading screen. You can see very well that it states what the server time is, the time of the next event, and has a countdown to when the next event starts. Also, if all players are in the same server, for example, if you're not separating US players from European players, then have at least 2 instances of an event so players in different time zones can participate. Also, very important to know when daylight savings happens in US and Europe, so you don't start an event an hour later or an hour earlier. Don't schedule maintenances if no one's going to be around afterwards. Recently we had a Chinese MMO developer who did maintenance 5 to 7 p.m. China time, and no one was around after that. So the maintenance failed, and the game was down for more than 12 hours. And no one was there to respond to user complaints either. So they saw a big drop in daily revenue. Players were very unhappy because they just thought the maintenance was taking very long. They didn't know that there was an issue with the game servers. And they're also unhappy that there was no response from the developer whatsoever. So this is a chart showing their daily revenue. You can see that there's a big drop that day because of the issue. Lastly, you can only get one chance to make a first impression. So don't flood the game with fake reviews and comments because players are smart enough to figure it out. Also, don't use our assets, music, sound effects from popular games because players will notice and they will rate down your game. Make sure your game has a good translator, a good community manager who has a good grasp of English because that does go a long way. So the common mistakes I've mentioned here are factors that contribute to lower retention and conversion in free-to-play games for Asian developers. These mistakes introduce friction, and friction lead to users leaving the game and churning out. So lower retention will lead to reduced monetization. And this is why. Here we're showing how players spend the more they play the game. So committed players, players who play the game 50 times or more, may just be 7% of players, but they're accounting for 84% of revenue. So it's very important to keep players in the game in the long run, because the more time they spend playing the game, the more they spend. The more transactions they do, and the more they spend per transaction. So don't make the common mistakes that other Asian developers have done that I've highlighted. And do apply these learnings and best practices to your own game. So thank you very much for your time. For a copy of this presentation, you can email me at davidchu@gamestop.com. We have a lot more talks and data on our developer website, developers.congregate.com. If you have a web game you want to bring to Kongregate, it's apps@congregate.com. And for mobile games, you can just email me as well. And follow us on Twitter. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much, David.